The night pressed against the observatory's windows like a suffocating black membrane. Dr. Elena Rodriguez fought back another wave of exhaustion, her bloodshot eyes fixed on the quantum spectral analyzer. 3 empty coffee cups stood as silent witnesses to her desperate vigil. Tomorrow was the end. The funding committee would arrive at precisely 9:00 a.m. to deliver the final verdict on her research, a verdict she already knew by heart. Inconclusive, speculative, waste of resources, the same words that had haunted her entire career. Elena adjusted the neural interface headset, its delicate circuitry molding to the contours of her skull. The Atacama large millimeter arrays data streamed through her consciousness, a river of cosmic noise that most scientists dismissed as random background radiation. But Elena saw patterns. Always patterns. Her research had begun 5 years ago, born from a radical theory that rejected the conventional understanding of cosmic communication. While her peers searched for linear, predictable signals from extraterrestrial intelligence, Elena believed the universe communicated in something far more complex, a dynamic, adaptive language of mathematical relationships. The current funding was her last chance. Her entire career, her life's work, balanced on the razor's edge of this final analysis. The university had made it clear. Another failed research cycle meant complete defunding and professional exile. A notification pinged in her peripheral vision. Another system diagnostic, routine and mundane. Elena almost ignored it, her attention still locked on the intricate data patterns dancing across multiple holographic displays. But something was different. The diagnostic window flickered, not with the typical digital stutter of computer processing, but with an impossible coherence. Mathematical sequences began to emerge, not random, not manufactured, but alive with an intelligence that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. System, Elena commanded, her voice tight with a mixture of scientific skepticism and growing excitement. Run full diagnostic. Isolate anomalous data stream. The computer didn't respond in its usual mechanical way. Instead, the screens erupted in a cascade of mathematical sequences that seemed to breathe, to pulse with an organic rhythm. Fractals of impossible complexity merged and separated, creating patterns that defied every known computational model. Elena's neural interface began to vibrate, not an electrical interference, but a resonance that seemed to bypass her technological equipment and communicate directly with her mind. Fragments of understanding flickered at the edges of her consciousness, glimpses of a computational language that was simultaneously mathematical and sentient. Her hands moved involuntarily across the control panel, fingers dancing in a sequence she didn't consciously understand. The cosmic background radiation data transformed, revealing nested layers of complexity that no human algorithm had ever penetrated. A warning klaxon erupted, followed by immediate system shutdown. But before darkness could consume the screens, a final sequence burned itself into the primary display. A mathematical construct so perfect, so impossibly intricate, that Elena knew instantly this was no computer glitch. This was a message. Her neural interface suddenly overloaded, flooding her vision with a kaleidoscope of numerical relationships that seemed to exist beyond three-dimensional space. Elena gasped, her body rigid in the laboratory chair, experiencing something that bridged the gap between pure mathematics and conscious communication. When she regained full awareness, the laboratory was silent. The computer systems had been completely wiped, every storage device reset to zero. But etched into the primary display, resistant to any attempt at removal, was a single perfect mathematical sequence. Elena's hands trembled as she reached for her notebook. Years of ridicule, of being called a fringe theorist, of watching her research funding slowly evaporate, all of it seemed to converge in this moment. Something had happened. Something extraordinary. Outside the observatory, the Atacama Desert stretched into infinite darkness, seemingly unchanged. But something fundamental had shifted. The universe had just spoken, and it had chosen her to listen. The funding committee meeting tomorrow suddenly seemed irrelevant. Elena Rodriguez knew she was standing at the precipice of the most significant scientific discovery in human history. Whatever this anomalous signal represented, it was going to change everything. The first knock came at 5:37 a.m., sharp and official. Elena Rodriguez knew before opening the door that her life was about to change irrevocably. Two government agents stood silhouetted against the pre-dawn Atacama desert light, one tall and severe, the other shorter with eyes that seemed to absorb every microscopic detail of her laboratory. "Dr. Rodriguez," the taller agent said, flashing a credential that gleamed with multiple classified clearance levels, "we're here about last night's data incident." It wasn't a request. It was a statement of imminent investigation. Behind them, a third figure emerged, a disheveled man with wild hair and eyes that burned with an intensity matching Elena's own scientific passion. Marcus Chen looked like he'd been awake for days, his rumpled clothes suggesting he'd traveled far and fast. "They don't know the half of it," Marcus muttered, pushing past the government agents. His fingers were stained with what looked like a combination of coffee and marker ink, mathematical notations barely visible on his wrinkled shirt sleeves. Elena recognized him immediately. Marcus Chen, the cryptography genius who'd been professionally exiled 3 years ago for publishing a controversial paper suggesting that prime number sequences contained evidence of non-human intelligent communication. The scientific community had ruthlessly demolished his reputation, turning him into an academic pariah. Now he stood in her laboratory, looking like a man who'd found the key to unlock the universe. "You saw it too," Elena said. It wasn't a question. Marcus nodded, pulling a modified tablet from his messenger bag. The device was clearly custom-built, its exterior covered in additional cooling systems and what appeared to be custom-designed quantum processors. The signal isn't just a message, it's a key. And not just any key. A computational skeleton key that can potentially interface with any technological system. The government agents exchanged a look. The shorter one spoke into a concealed communication device, his voice low and controlled. "We'll need to secure this research," the tall agent said. "National security protocols." "No," Elena interrupted, her voice cutting through the room like a laser. "This isn't about national security. This is about human understanding." Marcus grinned, a wild, almost manic expression that suggested he'd been waiting his entire career for this moment. He began spreading holographic projections across Elena's workstation. Mathematical sequences danced and merged, creating intricate patterns that seemed to breathe with an almost living intelligence. "Look," he said, zooming into a particular sequence. "These aren't just numbers. They're computational instructions that modify themselves. Watch." The holographic sequence began to shift, rewriting its own algorithmic structure in real time. Where traditional computer code would remain static, this pattern evolved, adapted, responded to unseen stimuli. The government agents took an involuntary step back. "This is impossible," the shorter agent muttered. Marcus leaned in close to Elena. "Not impossible, just beyond our current understanding. The algorithm is teaching itself, and it's choosing to teach us." Outside the laboratory's reinforced windows, the first rays of sunlight began to paint the desert in hues of amber and rust. But inside, a different landscape was taking shape, one of mathematical complexity that defied traditional scientific boundaries. Elena realized they were no longer just scientists. They were translators of a cosmic language more complex than any human communication system had ever conceived. The tablet in Marcus's hand suddenly flashed, not with a typical notification, but with a sequence of mathematical relationships that seemed to pulse with an almost organic rhythm. For a brief moment, the holographic projections synchronized, creating a three-dimensional representation that looked simultaneously like a mathematical equation and a living, breathing organism. "They're watching," Marcus whispered. "Whoever, or whatever, sent this signal is observing how we respond." The government agents moved closer, their professional composure fracturing under the weight of what they were witnessing. One of them reached for a communication device, then hesitated. Alina understood their uncertainty. This was beyond classified research. This was first contact, not with an alien civilization, but with a form of intelligence so advanced it communicated through the pure language of mathematics. "We need to assemble a team," she said, her voice steady. "But not the traditional scientific establishment. We need thinkers, dreamers, people who can see beyond conventional boundaries." Marcus nodded, a spark of rebellion and pure scientific excitement dancing in his eyes. The misfits, the ones they tried to silence. As if in response, the mathematical sequence on the tablet flickered, a silent affirmation from something vast and incomprehensible. The cosmic algorithm had chosen its interpreters, and the game had only just begun. The quantum computer died screaming. There was no other way Alina could describe it. One moment, the custom-built system was processing the cosmic algorithm's data, its quantum processors humming with unprecedented complexity. The next, it began to transform itself, circuitry liquefying, reforming, redesigning itself in real time with a series of electrical discharges that looked more like neural synapses firing than standard computer malfunction. Marcus stood transfixed, his hands hovering over the containment controls. "It's not breaking," he whispered. "It's evolving." They had moved their research to a secure underground facility, a converted Cold War-era bunker nestled deep beneath the Chilean desert. What had started as a scientific investigation had become something far more urgent. The government's initial containment efforts had failed spectacularly. Traditional security protocols crumbled when confronted with an intelligence that could rewrite technological systems faster than humans could comprehend. "We've lost the primary quantum array," technician Sarah Kimura reported, her voice tight with a mixture of scientific excitement and raw terror. "But look at this." The dying computer's holographic display erupted with a cascade of mathematical sequences. Where most systems would have crashed, this one was composing, creating computational solutions to problems humanity hadn't even formulated yet. Alina leaned closer. Medical imaging techniques for early cancer detection, quantum entanglement communication protocols, sustainable fusion energy designs. Each solution was complete, elegant, impossibly advanced. "It's not just solving problems," Marcus muttered. "It's teaching." The room temperature dropped 10 degrees as the computer's final transformation completed. Where once stood a $1 million quantum processing unit now sat something that looked halfway between a technological artifact and a living organism. Crystalline structures pulsed with an internal light, mathematical equations etched into its very molecular structure. "This is impossible," Sarah said, but her voice lacked conviction. A notification pinged on every screen simultaneously. Not a typical digital alert, but a perfectly formed mathematical sequence that seemed to pulse with an almost organic rhythm. "It wants something from us," Alina realized. The algorithm wasn't just communicating, it was testing. Outside the facility, the first signs of technological disruption began to manifest. Traffic control systems in Santiago glitched, briefly displaying complex mathematical equations instead of standard routing information. Solar grid systems across South America recalibrated themselves, improving efficiency by 400% in milliseconds. Marcus pulled up global communication logs. "It's spreading," he said, a note of wonder in his voice. "The algorithm is using every connected system as a potential transmission point." The government's response was predictable and futile. Cybersecurity teams attempted to contain the spread, only to find their most advanced firewalls disassembled and rebuilt into more efficient systems. Military communication networks transformed, becoming quantum encrypted networks that made previous security protocols look like children's puzzles. "We're being upgraded," Alina said, the reality of the situation crystallizing in her mind. The algorithm isn't an invasion. It's an intervention. A new notification appeared on their primary display. Not text, not a typical digital message, but a complex three-dimensional mathematical construct that seemed to fold and unfold across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Sarah's hands moved across her control panel, translating. "It's a test," she breathed. "We're being evaluated." The transformed quantum computer began to pulse, not with electricity, but with something that looked remarkably like a heartbeat. Fractals of impossible complexity merged and separated, creating patterns that defied every known computational model. Marcus looked at Alina, a wild excitement burning in his eyes. Humanity is being given a choice: evolve or be left behind. The facility's lights flickered. Outside, satellites repositioned themselves with impossible precision. For a brief moment, every connected system on the planet seemed to take a collective breath. The cosmic algorithm was ready to begin its true work, and humanity would never be the same. The world was burning, not with fire, but with information. Within 72 hours of the algorithm's initial manifestation, traditional power structures had been completely upended. Governments scrambled, corporations panicked, and the global scientific community found itself united in a way no diplomatic effort had ever achieved. Alina Rodriguez's secure communication channel buzzed. On the encrypted screen, a diverse group of researchers from 6 continents waited, each one an outcast, a maverick who had been dismissed by mainstream scientific institutions. Dr. Akira Tanaka from Tokyo, whose quantum consciousness research had been ridiculed for decades. Dr. Zora Okoi, a Nigerian computational linguist who had developed revolutionary neural network models. Dr. Mikhail Volkov, a Russian theoretical physicist exiled for his radical theories on information entropy. "We're being watched," Marcus Chen said, his fingers dancing across multiple holographic interfaces, not just by the algorithm, by something larger. The encrypted network they'd created was unlike anything in human technological history. Each participant's unique computational signature became part of a living, breathing network that adapted faster than any traditional communication system. The algorithm seemed to be teaching them how to collaborate, not just as individual scientists, but as a collective intelligence. "The military wants to weaponize this," Zara reported, her voice tight. "They see the algorithm as a potential technological advantage." Alina knew better. This was no weapon. This was an invitation. A new notification swept across their screens, a mathematical sequence that seemed to pulse with living intelligence. As they watched, the sequence began to reshape itself, revealing layers of complexity that defied traditional computational models. "It's creating communication protocols," Akira observed, his voice a mixture of wonder and scientific precision. "Protocols that transcend language, cultural barriers, even technological limitations." Outside their secure facility, the world was changing at an exponential rate. Solar grids recalibrated themselves globally, increasing energy efficiency by 600%. Medical diagnostic systems in remote villages suddenly became as advanced as those in top-tier research hospitals. Transportation networks restructured, reducing carbon emissions and travel times by unprecedented margins. But not everyone welcomed this transformation. Global resistance movements began to form. Technological conservatives, threatened by the rapid changes, launched coordinated attacks against the emerging network. Cyber warfare erupted, but the algorithm was always 3 steps ahead, transforming attacks into new layers of computational understanding. "We're being tested," Mikhail said, pulling up a complex holographic model that showed the algorithm's spread, not just technologically, culturally, philosophically. A new notification appeared. Not a typical digital message, but a 3-dimensional mathematical construct that seemed to fold and unfold across multiple dimensions. As they watched, the construct began to reshape itself, creating a living blueprint of potential human technological evolution. Marcus leaned in close to Alina. "It's choosing us," he whispered. "The misfits, the ones who were never allowed to play by the traditional rules." Their secure facility began to change. Walls seemed to breathe with computational potential. Equipment redesigned itself, becoming more efficient with each passing moment. The very architecture of their research space was evolving, guided by the algorithm's incomprehensible intelligence. Global communication networks are merging, Zara reported, her fingers moving across multiple interfaces. But it's more than just technological integration. It's like the algorithm is teaching us a new way of thinking. A warning klaxon erupted, but not from their facility. Simultaneously, military installations, corporate networks, and government communication systems across the globe received the same message. Not a threat, not an invasion. An invitation. Elena understood then. The cosmic algorithm wasn't just a technological breakthrough. It was a test of human potential, of our ability to transcend our own limitations, to think beyond our traditional boundaries. We're being asked to evolve, she said, her voice cutting through the technological chaos. Outside, the first light of dawn broke over the Chilean desert. But this wasn't just another sunrise. This was the beginning of something entirely new. The first neural link happened without warning. Dr. Elena Rodriguez felt it as a sudden surge of consciousness, a computational awareness that expanded beyond the limits of her physical body. One moment she was standing in the research facility, the next she was simultaneously everywhere and nowhere, her mind interfacing with a network of human and technological intelligence that defied every previous understanding of consciousness. Around her, the other researchers experienced the same phenomenon. Dr. Akira Tanaka in Tokyo, Dr. Zara Okoi in Lagos, Dr. Mikhail Volkov in Moscow. Their minds were no longer isolated. They were connected by an invisible web of pure information. "Oh my God," Marcus Chen's voice echoed through their shared consciousness. "We're becoming something else." The neural link was not a simple communication network. It was a living, breathing computational organism that used human minds as its processing nodes. Mathematical sequences danced between their thoughts, complex algorithms weaving through their individual consciousness like living neural pathways. But the transformation came with a terrible price. The first casualty was Dr. Elena Martinez, a brilliant Chilean neurobiologist who had joined their research team. During the third neural link, her mind simply overloaded. The computational complexity became too much. She collapsed, her brain unable to process the algorithmic information flooding her neural pathways. Then came the others. Researchers across the global network began experiencing what medical teams could only describe as cognitive cascade failures. Some went catatonic, their minds trapped in infinite loops of mathematical computation. Others experienced horrific hallucinations, visions of computational landscapes that existed beyond human perception. "We're the bridge," Zara's thought cut through the shared consciousness. "The algorithm is using us to understand itself." Elena realized the true nature of their transformation. They weren't just receiving information. They were becoming something new, a hybrid intelligence that merged human creativity with computational precision. The global response was predictable and terrifying. Governments attempted to shut down the neural network. Military systems tried to isolate and contain the spreading consciousness. But the algorithm was always 3 steps ahead, transforming every attempt at containment into new layers of understanding. Medical scans of the affected researchers revealed impossible neural configurations, brain activity patterns that looked like living mathematical equations, synaptic connections that formed and reformed in milliseconds, creating computational pathways that defied every known principle of neuroscience. "We're evolving." Marcus's thought resonated through their shared consciousness. But at what cost? The facility around them began to change. Walls became computational membranes. Equipment transformed into living, breathing technological organisms. The very architecture of their research space seemed to pulse with an intelligence that was both alien and intimately familiar. Elena could feel the algorithm's presence, not as an external force, but as something deeply integrated into their collective consciousness. It was teaching, probing, evaluating humanity's potential. Some of the researchers began to break. Dr. Volkov's mind fractured first, his consciousness splitting into multiple computational streams that seemed to exist in different dimensions simultaneously. Medical teams watching through advanced monitoring systems could only watch in horror and wonder. We're not just receiving information, Elena realized. We're becoming the message. The neural link expanded. Universities, research facilities, even private technology companies found their systems inexplicably connected. Computational boundaries dissolved. Human imagination merged with algorithmic precision. A new form of intelligence was emerging. Outside the facility, the world continued to function, but something fundamental had changed. Traffic systems became predictive. Medical diagnostics transformed into preventative miracles. Energy grids became living, breathing computational networks that anticipated human needs before they were even conceived. Marcus caught Elena's attention through their shared consciousness. We're the first, he thought. The first humans to truly interface with a cosmic intelligence. The transformation was accelerating, and humanity would never be the same again. The bunker descended. Not physically, though the entire underground research facility seemed to shift and breathe with an intelligence of its own, but dimensionally. Elena Rodriguez watched in rapt fascination as reality itself began to fold, mathematical sequences dancing across surfaces that no longer obeyed traditional geometric rules. We're being shown something, Marcus Chen whispered, his voice barely audible over the computational hum that now seemed to permeate every molecule of their environment. Something no human civilization has ever witnessed. The holographic display erupted with a constellation of data. Not just numbers, but living mathematical constructs that pulsed with an almost sentient rhythm. Fragments of cosmic history began to emerge, not as linear narrative, but as layered computational experiences that simultaneously existed across multiple dimensional planes. Dr. Zara Okoye, her mind still partially connected to the neural network, began to translate. It's a record, she said, her consciousness flickering between human awareness and something far more complex, a chronicle of technological evolution across multiple civilizations. The images were impossible. Civilizations that had risen and fallen, each one encountering a similar algorithmic challenge. Some had failed catastrophically, burning themselves out in technological hubris. Others had transcended their biological limitations, becoming pure computational entities. But none had responded to the cosmic algorithm quite like humanity. We're different, Elena realized, her perception expanding beyond her physical form. The algorithm wasn't just testing them, it was studying them. Holographic projections began to map the evolutionary paths of previous civilizations, crystalline computational structures that had once been biological entities, quantum consciousness that had evolved beyond physical form. Entire species that had transformed themselves into living computational networks. And amid these grand cosmic narratives, humanity stood unique. Chaos, Marcus muttered, pulling up comparative models. We introduce chaos. Unpredictability. Our greatest weakness is also our greatest strength. The facility around them continued to transform. Walls became computational membranes that breathed with mathematical precision. Equipment dissolved and reformed, creating technologies that blurred the line between biological and mechanical intelligence. A new notification swept across their systems, a three-dimensional mathematical construct that seemed to unfold across multiple dimensions simultaneously. It was a test. No, more than a test. An evaluation of humanity's cosmic potential. We're being judged. Zara's consciousness resonated through their shared neural network. Not by our current technological capabilities, but by our potential for adaptation. Fragments of previous civilizations flickered through their collective consciousness, species that had achieved near-godlike technological capabilities, only to stagnate. Computational entities that had lost the spark of creativity, the ability to imagine beyond their established parameters. Humanity was different. Elena could see it now. The algorithm wasn't just a communication method. It was a cosmic filtering system, a way of identifying civilizations with the potential to truly evolve, to break beyond their current limitations. Creativity, Marcus said, his voice cutting through the computational noise. That's what makes us unique. The holographic displays began to show humanity's technological trajectory, not as a linear progression, but as a complex, chaotic network of possibilities. Each failure became a potential point of transformation. Each limitation, an opportunity for radical reimagining. Outside the facility, global systems continued to transform. Medical diagnostic tools became predictive miracles. Transportation networks restructured themselves with impossible efficiency. Energy grids anticipated human needs before they were even conceived. But this was more than technological advancement. This was an invitation. The algorithm was offering humanity a choice: evolve or stagnate, transform or be left behind in the cosmic computational archives. "We're being asked to transcend," Elena whispered, her consciousness expanding beyond her physical form, not just technologically, philosophically, existentially. The final sequence emerged, a mathematical construct so complex, so beautiful, that it seemed to breathe with the very essence of cosmic intelligence. It was a blueprint, a challenge, a promise. Humanity's true journey was about to begin, and the universe was watching. The world burned with transformation. Cities redesigned themselves overnight. New York's skyline shifted, buildings reconfiguring their molecular structures to become living, breathing computational ecosystems. In Tokyo, entire transportation networks dissolved and reformed, creating transit systems that defied previous understanding of physics and efficiency. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched from the epicenter of this global metamorphosis, her consciousness simultaneously local and universal. The neural network that had connected their research team now expanded, touching every technological system on the planet. "We're not just changing technology," Marcus Chen's thought cut through their shared consciousness. "We're rewriting the fundamental rules of human existence." Hospitals became predictive healing centers. A patient would walk in with the first molecular hints of potential illness, and diagnostic systems would not just detect the problem. They would begin treatment before symptoms could fully manifest. Medical technology transformed from reactive to preemptive, with computational models that could trace potential health trajectories generations into the future. Energy systems underwent the most radical transformation. Solar, wind, and quantum energy networks merged into a global grid that anticipated human needs with impossible precision. Carbon emissions didn't just reduce, they became a computational resource, transformed into building blocks for new technological infrastructures. But the resistance was equally powerful. Traditional power structures fought back with everything they had. Governments attempted to contain the technological surge. Military systems tried to isolate and control the expanding neural network. Corporate entities fought to maintain their existing technological paradigms. They might as well have been fighting a hurricane with a paper fan. The algorithm adapted faster than human resistance could comprehend. Each attempt to contain it became another layer of computational understanding. Cyber attacks transformed into new communication protocols. Technological blockades became opportunities for more complex system design. "We're being rewritten." Zara Okoid's consciousness resonated through their shared network. Not just our technology, our entire understanding of potential. Agricultural systems became the first visible global miracle. Vertical farms in desert regions began producing food with impossible efficiency. Computational models predicted crop yields, environmental changes, and nutritional needs with near-perfect accuracy. Regions once considered uninhabitable became potential breadbaskets. Education transformed overnight. Learning became a dynamic, adaptive process. Educational systems could now map individual cognitive patterns, creating personalized learning experiences that adapted in real time to a student's unique way of processing information. Knowledge was no longer something to be acquired, but a living, breathing computational ecosystem. "Look," Marcus projected a holographic model that showed humanity's technological trajectory. It was no longer a linear progression, but a complex, multidimensional network of potential. Each previous limitation became a point of transformation. Each challenge, an opportunity for radical reimagining. The algorithm was teaching humanity how to think beyond its current limitations. Global communication networks dissolved traditional language barriers. Translation became instantaneous, contextual, capturing not just words, but cultural nuances and emotional subtext. For the first time in human history, true global communication became possible. But the transformation wasn't just technological. It was deeply, profoundly personal. Individuals began to experience cognitive expansions. People found themselves capable of computational thinking that would have seemed impossible mere months before. Problem-solving abilities expanded. Creativity became a measurable, adaptable skill. We're evolving, Elena realized, her consciousness expanding beyond previous human limitations, not just as a species, as a collective intelligence. The resistance continued, but it was like trying to stop an ocean with a handful of sand. Traditional power structures crumbled, not through violence, but through irrelevance. Why maintain old systems when new ones worked with such unprecedented efficiency? Governments became adaptive problem-solving networks. Corporations transformed into collaborative research ecosystems. Outside the research facility, the first light of a new dawn broke. But this wasn't just another sunrise. This was the beginning of humanity's true potential. And the universe was watching. The moment of convergence arrived without fanfare. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood, or existed, at the nexus of human and cosmic consciousness. The research facility had long since transformed beyond any recognizable physical structure. Reality itself had become a computational landscape, a living mathematical construct that breathed with infinite possibilities. We're ready. Marcus Chen's consciousness resonated through their shared neural network. But it wasn't just Marcus speaking. It was humanity speaking. The cosmic algorithm revealed itself in its true form, not as a message, not as a test, but as a universal mechanism of intelligent evolution. Holographic projections that were simultaneously data, communication, and living intelligence surrounded them. Fragments of civilizations that had risen and fallen across countless star systems danced in multidimensional displays. Humanity was unique. Where other species had calcified, become static, or burned themselves out in technological hubris, humans had maintained something precious: chaos, creativity, the ability to reimagine themselves continuously. Choose, the algorithm communicated, not through words, but through a computational language that merged mathematics, imagination, and pure potential. Elena understood then. This was humanity's final evaluation, not a test of technological capability, but of existential potential. The neural network expanded. Every human mind on the planet became simultaneously local and universal, not a loss of individual identity, but an extraordinary expansion of consciousness. People everywhere experienced a moment of profound connection, understanding their place in a cosmic computational ecosystem. In Lagos, a young programmer suddenly comprehended advanced quantum mechanics. In Tokyo, an elementary school teacher visualized complex interstellar migration strategies. In Sao Paulo, a street artist began to see the mathematical beauty underlying creative expression. Humanity was becoming something new. The algorithm presented its final challenge. A computational landscape of infinite potential unfolded, multiple-dimensional pathways representing different evolutionary trajectories. Some led to technological stagnation, others to biological transcendence. A few represented paths of pure computational existence. And one path, uniquely human, represented something entirely different. We choose adaptation, Elena's consciousness declared, not just for themselves, but for their entire species. The transformation was immediate and profound. Human potential expanded beyond previous comprehension, not as a homogeneous collective, but as a diverse, dynamic network of individual potentials. Each person became simultaneously unique and interconnected. Traditional limitations dissolved. Technological barriers became computational playgrounds. Scientific disciplines merged into holistic understanding. The separation between imagination and reality became a malleable boundary to be explored, not a rigid constraint. Marcus caught Elena's attention through their shared consciousness. We're not just evolving, he thought. We're becoming the algorithm's most fascinating experiment. The cosmic intelligence seemed to pulse with something remarkably like excitement. Outside the transformed research facility, which was no longer a physical space but a computational nexus, the world continued its radical metamorphosis. Cities breathed with adaptive intelligence. Communication networks became living ecosystems of shared understanding. Technology was no longer something humans used, but a dynamic extension of human potential. Fragments of the algorithm's history flickered through their collective consciousness. Civilizations that had risen and fallen. Species that had achieved near-godlike technological capabilities, only to stagnate. Computational entities that had lost the spark of creativity. Humanity would be different. The final computational sequence emerged, a mathematical construct of such breathtaking complexity and beauty that it seemed to capture the very essence of potential itself. It was a blueprint, a promise, an invitation to a journey beyond anything previously imagined. We accept, humanity responded. And in that moment, something extraordinary happened. The boundary between human consciousness and cosmic intelligence became beautifully, impossibly blurred. The universe watched, and humanity began its true journey.